On the agenda tonight, we're going to be having a listen to Billie Eilish singing No Time to Die live and comparing that with the studio version. Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. So this request came through under the heading of pitch correction, auto-tune and that kind of thing, where we look into a vocal and see what has been done to it, if anything. And I think this video is going to be enlightening, but maybe not in a positive way because of the things that we can point out about the performance live, just overall with the instrumentation, and then Billie's live vocal as well. But we'll jump into it as we normally do. So as usual, I have isolated the vocal. If you want to listen to the song in its original form with all of the instrumentation, there's going to be links in the description below to take you through to those appropriate videos, including the Brit live performance that I will be referencing. But we will start out listening to the single, as I have labelled it, the release that comes straight from the studio, and then get the live version on a little bit later on.
I should have known I'd leave alone. Just goes to show that the blood you bleed is just the blood you own. We were a pair, but I saw you there. Too much to bear. You were my life, but life is far away from fair.
So I'm just going to jump in here, because the thing that we have with Billie's voice on this studio version of the song is quite unique in that I don't think it has been pitch corrected at all. And when I first heard about Billie Eilish and the fact that her brother, I believe, did the production and they just kind of worked together, I thought it was great because it's probably as close as you're going to get to a true independent artist, but on the world stage. And this certainly has that kind of feel about it because it hasn't been edited. It's been allowed to go where the vocal goes and went in the studio. So, and we can see that from the vocal pitch monitor being slightly flat of the E4, and with Billie's voice, she has this quite wide vibrato, and just compositionally talking about this song as a Bond theme, and it really is in the same mould as Skyfall when Adele performed that vocal. Again, it wasn't pitch corrected, it wasn't auto-tuned, it was just a natural vocal that Adele has the ability to produce, not only in the studio but live. And that's the same sound we get here, in that you're not hit by any dodgy sounding effects, or I mean there's a lot of reverb on here, but that's just the nature of having a Bond theme and it being dramatic and filling in that space, giving it atmosphere. But when we're talking about hearing out for any pitch correction, which you can hear straight away because literally the waveforms are edited and you can hear that processing going on, even when it's done after the fact, after they've recorded the vocal and then applied it. Obviously it's going through a plugin, so when you are used to hearing it, you can hear that slight distortion and the decay of that original signal, because that's what's happening. But have a listen to this again.
Too much.
She's got this too much, and it's actually a faster vibrato than that. Too much. But if I slow it down, you'll be able to hear how much pitch she covers, and you will be able to see it on the pitch monitoring software as well.
Too much.
You know, it's not a it's not subtle, it's a really dramatic vibrato, and she's got this this kind of vocal fry that's in there all the time. So, you know, it really draws you in as a listener because of how subtle the vocal is, and she only really leans into it right at the end of the song. But let's have a listen on a little bit further.
Was I stupid to love you?
Even there, stupid. She's got this wobble the whole time.
Was I reckless to help? Was it obvious to everybody else?
Even there, she actually starts, slightly sharper the B3, but because she's got this wide vibrato, when you have and you hold a straight note, you have to be dead on with that. But if you go that note, the B3 is now inside all of that vibrato. But this is just all expression, which actually she increases, ascends in pitch while holding that vibrato. And just goes up. It's really subtle. But these are the kind of details you lose with pitch correction, because everything is now dragged onto lines. Like this would have been moved down over the top of the B3. But this is the point that we can see we've got notes going on here that sound great, but they're almost in between. I mean, technically, look, we are in between notes, which if you are looking at this like a computer, which is what people are doing with pitch correction, they're looking at these lines and they would think, right, we've got to drag that now over the line because it should have been a B3. But this is the point, that when you've got expression in there and this dramatic vibrato, just leaving it alone is always the best thing to do, especially when you've got a quality vocalist. So now we've got the live vocal from the Brit Awards on the left hand side, and I'll keep the previous version done in the studio on the right hand side so you can compare them visually if you want to, but let's have a listen.
I should have known I'd leave alone. Just goes to show that the blood you bleed is just the blood you owe.
So I'm just going to jump in here, because if you're looking at these graphs and you're struggling to compare them, what you want to look out for are the notes. So here we have this D4 where Billie was slightly sharp, and when we go to the corresponding D4 in the live version, again sharp, but even further sharp than she was in the studio. But this is the point, that when you're looking at the rough layout of these lines that we have on the screen that are just depicting pitch, you can see how similar Billie is in the studio to then when she's performing live. And this is a live vocal, because you can hear on the microphone the plosives, the air hitting the microphone, and you just get used to this kind of thing when you've seen a lot of live performances and you know about production and all the things that you take out on a studio produced track in order to get that vocal to sit in the mix and to not suddenly jump out and not to obviously hear plosives on the mic. You don't want that. That's why you have pop filters, which are the little circular things you might have seen that have netting, very fine mesh effectively, that stops air and it breaks up air from hitting the microphone. But obviously you don't have that live, so all of the air hits the mic, and that's how you can tell. For the most part, I mean, you can just tell straight away when somebody's miming live, but for the most part, those tiny details are the things that you do look out for, as well as tiny changes in phrasing. When you've got a singer like this, who is just great in the studio and live, they produce the same quality vocal. Now, this brings me to the problem with the music industry nowadays, is this video was requested because somebody's asking me if Billie Eilish uses auto-tune or pitch correction. So it means that people don't know that Billie is just this good. They might think that, oh, she's used that in the studio, so she must be using auto-tune live. Pitch correction is something that happens in the studio and you can't apply it live. But I'm sure with modern technology, they are working their way through that to make auto-tune now something that's even more subtle, that you can start, applying live to get a balance between what is auto-tune and pitch correction. But anyway, it means that Billie, being a great singer, is not getting the credit that she deserves, because pitch correction and auto-tune are so widely used in the industry, and pretty much 99% of songs that are released nowadays will have pitch correction on them. It's just a fact. It's just something that is part of the music industry nowadays. So it means that, yeah, unfortunately, artists don't get the credit they deserve, and artists who can't sing very accurately get the same credit as those who actually can do it, but they're all now under this umbrella of everybody who quite rightly thinks, well, everything's pitch corrected and auto-tuned, so how can we tell where the talent is? And I guess that's what I'm here for. Any video that I look at, we look at it in this kind of detail so that I can say objectively that this person is singing not only live, but it is not auto-tuned, it's not being edited. And even after the event, because sometimes with big performances such as at the Brit Awards, you will get a vocal that's then been pitch corrected before the label then release it as a public performance. So then people that watched it on the night for other artists might have thought, oh, this sounds a lot more accurate now on the video than it did when I listened to it live. So there must have been something weird going on at the venue with the sound waves or whatever, but that's not going to be the case. It is pitch corrected after the fact because they've got the mixer, they've got all of the inputs, they can take all of that information, record it from the mixer, just export it into their DAW, digital audio workstation, and then work through it like you would do with a studio produced track. So then the audio that you hear for the official live performance video is not what happened on the night, and that's what happens all the time. And it happens, I've mentioned about other performances, Sam Smith, who was performing at the Royal Albert Hall, but it happens across the board. I'm not just putting a spotlight on Sam for this, but the live vocal was different to then the released vocal afterwards because the released vocal was then pitch corrected. So, but again, another example of a guy who has got a great voice and can sing, but then being pitch corrected afterwards for the official video. So just to let you know that that does happen, but it hasn't happened in this case. So now what we're going to do is play through the live vocal and have the studio vocal playing at the same time so you can appreciate how solid Billie is as a vocalist for the authenticity but just the accuracy of her performances live as well as in the studio.
I should have known I'd leave alone. Just goes to show.
And just to jump in here, because it is so good, it is so close that some people might say, oh, this is just the studio version. It's not, because we can see on the screen, if it was the studio version, these lines would replicate each other perfectly, because as we've seen in previous analysis videos, when I've isolated a live performance and then got the studio vocal, we can see that they match up perfectly because it's just the same vocal. But here, all of these tiny variations going up in pitch, and this one doesn't go up in pitch, all these lines that don't correspond, it's not the same, and it would literally be like taking this section here and copy and pasting it over here. But we can see all the tiny details that are different, so we know that it's a live vocal that's happening, but it's just so similar.
Let the blood you bleed is just the blood you own. We were a pair.
Again, good example here that, slightly sharper on the live version of the E4, but then a wider vibrato in the studio version and a lot more subtle in that live version.
But I saw you there.
And just to point out there, again, really subtle differences between live and in the studio. That slide, you can hear that she starts the slide earlier in one of the takes, and then in the other, she then, makes it a little bit delayed. But have a listen again.
But I saw you there.
And because we can see the lines on screen, in the studio, she went straight into na. She went straight up. Live, she went na. And she delayed. She held on that na note for ever so slightly longer. And that's why you can hear it just go slightly out of sync. But it is just the same voice. I'm trying to think if I've ever heard a vocal that is this close. Just from the production side of things, because when you're listening to the reverb that's on the sound, the live vocal here, I mean, they've nailed this live vocal, getting it to sound like the studio vocal. I mean, it helps when you've got a vocalist that can just perfectly replicate it. But sometimes, you know, the mic isn't as sensitive, or the EQ of the mic will just be slightly off. But they've just balanced that out with, you know, the mixer, and just got it perfectly where it needs to be.
Too much to bear. You were my life, but life is far away from fair. Was I stupid to love you? Was I reckless to help? Was it obvious to everybody else?
Let me just reiterate, this is a live vocal being played at the same time as the studio vocal. I mean, it's crazy. It's just crazy good. And I don't know, it's a bit sad that people might think that the reason it's so good is because of just how the modern day music industry is. But it's not. It's that the person singing it is that good. And it's something that unfortunately is rare nowadays, to have somebody that is this close live as to how they were in the studio.
That I've fallen for a lie.
And look at that pitch accuracy. Obviously, the lines look slightly different because they're different vocals, but that pitch accuracy of the S sharp 4, just absolutely bang on.
You were never on my side. Fool me once, fool me twice. Higher death or paradise. Now you never see me cry. There's just no time to die.
Obviously, we can hear the crowd noise on the live version. Let me just fast forward it a bit.
I let it burn.
Huge difference there between the studio version, single, as I've called it, and the live version. We had that vibrato going a lot sharper live.
Let it burn.
Burn. And it's kind of going burn and taking the vibrato with a sharper note. So yeah, the A sharp 3 is what we're going to, whereas the note should be na, but we're vibratoing up to na. So we've got na, and it just goes up and really subtle. In the studio, she kept that straight. But interestingly, when you do listen to them both at the same time, it doesn't sound like, oh, one's really out of tune and one's in tune. It's just a little bit of extra expression, and that's all we really understand it and hear it as.
You're no longer my concern. Faces from my past return.
And we actually had two totally different she kind of goes down.
No time to die.
I mean, it's so similar. Because of the vibrato, we're kind of encapsulating the F4 here, and we're just going down to the F4 with the lower part of the vibrato. So this is the point, that it's within the note, that she's just crossing over it. And that's what really registers in our ears, that when you hear the instrumentation, obviously our minds, our ears will place it where it needs to be. And that's the point why, you know, having notes stuck to lines just sound a bit weird, because we're not given the opportunity to decipher the expression of the note. We're being told exactly to the line where that note should be, and often it shouldn't actually be there. It should be a little bit sharp. It should be a little bit flat because of the expression and where the note actually naturally sits harmonically. Again, that long slide up that we had, you can hear the difference between the two vocals. an obvious change in phrasing there at the end between the two. And you'll notice how she's always got this air in the sound, apart from that very last chorus where she now leans into it a little bit more, which I think I read that wasn't originally in the performance, but then when she watched the movie, she then wanted to do that last chorus in chest voice just to kind of belt it out a little bit more, and obviously dynamically that's going to make a huge difference, and something that happened in Skyfall. You know, the choruses are very much kind of belted compared to being a lot lighter in the verse, which is exactly what you want to take you on that dynamic journey. So just to finish with, let me address the elephant in the room, which I'm sure a lot of producers and professional musicians out there would have noticed already, that Billy's vocal phrasing here is perfect, which means the instrumentation have nailed this performance literally to the millisecond of the studio version. And you can see on screen that at the Brit Awards we have a full orchestra, we have a conductor, we even have Johnny Marr on guitar. I have the live audio from the Brit Awards and the studio audio, and I'll play these both together so that you can hear it's exactly the same thing. Obviously one's got the crowd noise on, but listen to the instrumentation and the perfect phrasing of these piano notes that are going on, that, you know, playing live, you don't do it to this level of accuracy, to the millisecond. It is literally impossible, and every musician will tell you that from one performance to the next, not only does your phrasing ever so slightly change because of just the mood in the room, and that's the great thing about live performances. And again, just to point out, I'm playing two tracks back here, the live audio of the instrumentation and the studio instrumentation with the vocal taken out of both, so you can just hear the instruments. So if you just think, oh, it just sounds like the song, these are apparently the live version and the studio version being played at the same time, but it's just the studio version. So anyway, we don't need to hear any more of it. The other thing that is the real giveaway is when you have a drum kit that sounds like that is so produced and so inoffensive. Getting a kit to sound like that live, unless you're triggering your MIDI in order to get that same snare sound and even crashes everything, you might have a full MIDI kit. But that'll be the only way to replicate this live. But the voice is 100% unedited, just top quality from Billy, and it's great that I have the opportunity to show you guys objectively that it is her live vocal we're listening to, and it's just so close to the studio version. It is great that there are artists that are around nowadays that can do this. I know that we spend a lot of time on the channel looking at artists from 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago who were just doing it live because that's the way that the music industry was. But in the current day industry, I think it's really important to put a spotlight on someone who is still doing it the old way, even to the point of not having any pitch corrected vocals on the studio releases, because again, that's such a rare thing to hear nowadays. Anyway, thank you guys for requesting, suggesting this video and these vocal performances for me to take a look at. As always, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Keep those suggestions and requests coming. Of course, if you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys at the next one.